What's up, guys, and welcome back to The Love for the Game. We have another special video for you guys today. It is about none other than the GOAT sports team, the Boston Celtics. I'm going to be talking about, their future, how I think they're going to, play next season, what I think is going to happen to the team. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Jaylen Brown, gone. To the Sixers. It's brutal. Goodness gracious. I can't believe it. 76ers. I went from thinking we were getting Giannis, potentially LeBron. I didn't think LeBron was going to Boston, but, it was on the table, right? I was thinking, we're getting Giannis. And we got Paul George. Alrighty. So I actually didn't even want Giannis. I think Jaylen Brown has a higher ceiling currently. At this stage in their career, Giannis is always injured. I think Giannis takes away from the ball touches on the team. The way Boston plays, I think it's crucial to get everyone involved. So I was not excited to get Giannis, and I was even less excited to find out that we gave up Jaylen Brown, who at this stage in his career looks like more of a superstar than Tatum. Because Jaylen Brown, I always was a Tatum guy, right? They both had a good paint presence. But Tatum was a little bit taller and he could hit the three. That was, I think, Jaylen Brown's biggest weakness was his three-point shooting. But last season proved that he's able to shoot the three on a very, very high efficiency. As well, Jaylen Brown has a better mid-range game, which, like I've talked about before, opens up more for the team. He's also better at getting inside. He's more athletic. And unfortunately, coming off Tatum's injury, I don't know how much he's going to drive. I think he's going to fall back more on that three-point shooting, which he's a great shooter. But I think falling in love with a three is really what gets teams, but the Celtics specifically, in a lot of trouble. I think it's really important to have a good paint presence. And that's why I think the biggest positive that came from this is actually Mitchell Robinson. I think Paul George is solid. I have no beef with Paul George except he's old and he's always injured. I want our players to be able to play the entire series. If we can get into the playoffs or play, majority of the games. Paul George, when he came in, was looking like KD. A six. I don't know what Paul George is listed at. I think he's 6'9" or 6'10". He's probably a little bit taller than what they have listed him at, so they don't make him play the 4 or the 5. But he's one of those. He was one of those guys that were real big, had a guard's handle, could shoot the ball at a high level. So Paul George in general, I don't have a problem with. But he's very injury prone at this stage in his career. He's not necessarily that guy anymore, so he does struggle to make the right pass in certain situations that I think is really detrimental to Boston's team and their play style. Boston is a huge, swing the rock, make the extra pass, because they've got such a deep bench and they have a lot of guys that can hit the three, get inside. You know what I mean? That's why I believe Mitchell Robinson is actually going to be the biggest positive for Boston in this upcoming season. Now, I hope he stays healthy as well, because I know he deals with injuries, but he's a big intensity guy. And I think, I've talked about it before, I think and I know Mitchell Robinson can hit the three. I know he can hit that mid-range, but I like that he doesn't go to it in-game. I think, like I was saying, I've talked about it before, I think the traditional centers are one of the biggest, misunderstood players in our league today, and I think they have a huge role. Now, it does depend on the team, but I think he's going to fit in perfectly with Boston. He grabs. I mean, he was one of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA. Right, he grabs a lot of offensive boards. He's able to put it back up and dish out, which the Boston Celtics have so many good 3-point shooters. I mean, Jason Tatum, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard. I'm looking for some of these guys off the bench. Hugo Gonzalez, which I'll talk about later. I said that a little weird. Hugo Gonzalez. I will talk about because I really like Hugo Gonzalez. I'll talk about him in a little bit. But Mitchell Robinson, I think, is exactly what the Celtics needed. They need a solid paint presence and a lob threat. So, they need a guy to be able to, that they can rely on to hit that shot, or at least give the teams like something to be aware of in the paint, rather than being able to come play out the entire game. Especially because Tatum, I don't think is going to drive nearly as much as he did last season. It's just going to be something that's in the back of your mind. It's hard to come back from that injury, and I understand why he wouldn't. Even players that fully recovered would, very rare, but look at KD. KD was able to go inside and pull up. Now he's so efficient, but he hardly drives inside anymore. And it just takes away from your athleticism. You're never going to be exactly the same, and it's always going to be in the back of your mind. You know what I mean? So I think that's really going to limit their game, because when you take it inside, the defense collapses, and then you're able to open up more for the team. That's why I like mid-range shots, but not just mid-range, drives inside. That's what Jaylen Brown did great. He was one of the best, inside drivers in the game, which is kind of a dying play style, really, because the three is so, put on a pedestal, which it should be. It's a huge part of today's game, but it does limit, I think, to a certain degree. Like I've talked again about before, people they want to look at the analytical side, and they don't watch the game and how players react and things like that. So I think their inside game is going to be a big problem for them this next season. That's what Jaylen Brown added. So I think Mitchell Robinson, being able to catch lobs and grab offensive boards, which is what I thought Luke Cornett did so well in Boston, which was incredibly underrated, and I'm glad he's getting his recognition at San Antonio. Because he was doing the exact same things in Boston that he was doing in San Antonio, and people didn't want to give him credit. Grabbing offensive boards, he was a huge lob threat. Even for pick and rolls and stuff, helping teams get inside. It's good to have a dominant big like that lives in the paint, which I think is underappreciated. I think a lot of teams want that, that big that can catch and shoot threes, which is great. But I think living in the paint is really where a lot of teams have found success. Look at Jokic, obviously that's an extreme example, but being able to get boards inside, have great footwork, and then kick out if they need to, and have, when you have the rest of the guys on your team that can hit that three ball, I think is very important. Now, I think positives, I think the depth of their bench has just gotten deeper. I think they have one of the most impressive benches in the NBA. Like I was talking about earlier, Hugo Gonzalez, right? Again, he's not a stat line guy when you look at the stats, but when you watch him play, he's such an energy guy, and not meaning he doesn't do anything for the team, but he's not necessarily going to give you 30, but he plays incredible defense. He has great court vision, and he gets the fans into it, which is just as important as any other aspect of the game. And it's not, I think teams get in trouble with these super teams where they have so many scorers on a team, or it gets away from your your main player touching the ball. So I think what I was gonna say is I could see it going one of two ways. I can see Boston really struggling and not being as good due to the loss of Jaylen Brown. But because of their play style and because of how smart Joe Mazzulla is, their head coach, I can actually see them having a huge year, which I think a lot of people are not talking about. But I think the way that their players mesh together, I think if Mitchell Robinson knows his role, if Paul George, to me, Paul George is the biggest what if. I think he really has to know his role and to understand that he's not that guy anymore. Knowing that, Jason Tatum is going to be the guy on their team who takes majority of their shots, and then the rest of the guys are going to be, they have a lot of guys that shoot over, 30, 33% from three. So most of those guys aren't going inside. They're catch and shoot and knocking down that three, which is huge. You know what I mean? But most of the offense is going to run through Jason Tatum. I hope he takes more inside just because of, how good he is. They have to cut off that three, so they're going to overplay, and then it's going to be easier for him to get inside. Easier for him to score in the paint, as well as causing the defense to collapse. You know what I mean? Pritchard, I hope, has another good season. They've got a lot of good perimeter defenders, Derek White being one of the best defenders in the NBA, as well as being one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. He's really stepped it up. I think, unfortunately, Jason Tatum coming back last season ultimately hurt the team for the worst. I think that's what caused Jaylen Brown to leave, because he's having one of the best seasons of his career. And now, Jason Tatum comes back and all the attention goes on him. As well as, I think, Jason Tatum being out allowed the bench to get more minutes and be more successful as a team, you know what I mean? And I do think the Celtics have one of the best teams, like team play, team basketball, which is why they're so successful. But falling in love with the three is their biggest problem. So I hope Paul George has a good season and is able to, successfully get inside. I hope Tatum takes more inside. And I'd like to see Pritchard get inside more. Pritchard surprisingly gets in the paint very quickly. Easily. He's just so quick. And, I don't know how much I want to see him take shots inside, but I know he can hit that mid-range, and I know he hits that little where he gets in front of his defender and just kind of pushes back on him and then goes for the lay. So I know he can hit that, but I just like to see him get inside so that he can kick it back out. It just creates more space for the team. Obviously, Joe Mazzulla is, very experienced, very successful, so he knows what he's doing. He's going to work his way around the team. So I'm very optimistic for this next season. I do think they're getting rid of Jaylen Brown was a problem, right? I don't know how much Jaylen Brown wanted out. I think it became like he felt like he was undervalued, and then the fans started saying like, oh, Jaylen Brown wants out. And then at that point it was like he had to get out. He couldn't go back, which I understand. It's just going to the Sixers is brutal. But I think playing full minutes and being healthy is going to be Celtics' biggest problem. They have the same team, not the same team, but same core team besides Jaylen Brown. I think adding Mitchell Robinson, that's going to be a huge success for them. And I think that's the biggest pro. I think people are not appreciating Mitchell Robinson's presence in the paint, which is what Boston was lacking. Let's see, what else? I think that's it for this video, guys. Their pros and cons for the season. I think people are going to be surprised with how well Boston performs. They got a lot of young guys. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. If you think they'll be better or worse, or you want me to talk about something else specifically. Thank you, guys, and thanks for loving the game.